There are ghosts in this world. Even the cultivators have only gone through the changes of the times, and those once glorious civilizations have long since declined. Speaking of ghosts doing ghost things. If you believe it, there may be many unexpected things in this world. If you really want to speak out about this note, it would be a break in the rules. But the heavenly way cannot keep it. Chapter 1. Night Journey of 100 Ghosts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I remember when I was 6 years old, I encountered a strange thing, and from that year on, I began to explore a new world. If you talk about encountering ghosts, you have to start when I was 6 years old. I remember a summer when I was 6 years old. At that time, frogs chirped and cicadas chirped. I remember that night, in the middle of the night, I had to urinate urgently. So I got off the brick bed where my grandfather was sleeping and prepared to use the toilet. My grandfather fell asleep, completely unaware. I pushed open the door lightly, afraid of disturbing my grandfather. Grandpa is very strange. I don't do anything on weekdays, just burn incense and pay homage to Buddha. As for whether he worships Buddhism or not, I don't know. It's just that the thing he worships, holding a sword in his hand, seems to be from Taoism or Buddhism. As a 6-year-old, I'm not sure. Later it was discovered that he was worshipping Zhang Daoling. That night, I came to my backyard. The moon was very bright, silver-white, illuminating the entire cloud layer, and the street was not so black. My home is an old-fashioned alley. Both the front and back doors have alleys, and my home is surrounded by these alleys, located in the middle of countless alleys. That night, there were no more people on the road, so I took a pee and prepared to go back. But the clouds suddenly blocked the moon's light source and disappeared in an instant. But deep down in my heart, that's a panic. At the age of 6, I am not young anymore, but I still fear the dark. When the clouds completely cover the moonlight, I'm really scared. But I'm not in a hurry, I'm feeling my way towards home. My backyard is not too big, but the moonlight suddenly appeared again at this moment. After all the clouds had dispersed, the moonlight shone on the entire alley again. I was about to grope into the backyard, but I became numb. Guess what? At the age of 6, I actually saw strange things all over the street, and many of them appeared in my mind. Among all the stories my grandfather told me, I can deeply affirm that this is the legendary ghost. At that time, I was startled and my heart was racing. How could a 6-year-old child have seen such a scene? I only see those wandering ghosts all over the streets and alleys. Some ghosts have terrifying appearances and even let out screams, but for so many sounds made by ghosts, no one was awakened. My heart beats very fast. Is this scream so loud that only I can hear it? I couldn't help but wonder, why hasn't anyone come to save me? At that time, I was sitting in the yard, never daring to take a step. I had already finished urinating, but I was almost scared to pee again. I instinctively wanted to call Grandpa, but suddenly I realized that ghosts outside were only wandering in that alley and not entering people's homes. But I dare not move at all. My grandfather said that this ghost can smell human breath, but as long as people don't move, the ghost won't be able to smell, and I just need to hold my breath. I remembered what my grandfather had said in my mind. I did everything he said, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I still exhaled a breath, but even though my breath was strong, the ghost still lingered in the alley. Not in my backyard. But I still dare not move. My legs have already become weak, and I am very panicked. I instinctively wanted to call Grandpa, but suddenly a big hand covered my mouth and he whispered in my ear. At the age of 6, I instinctively wanted to break free from that hand. I thought it was a ghost coming to take my life, but when I looked at the owner of that hand, I quieted down because it was my grandfather. Xuanpu, Xuanpu. Why don't you sleep so late and follow me back to the house quietly? At that time, my grandfather said to me with a solemn expression, but there was no fear at all. Seeing this ghost filled the entire alley, my grandfather was not in the slightest panic. Grandpa took my hand and led me into the house, where he breathed a sigh of relief. Grandpa looked at me and said to me, "Xuanpu, are you scared?" Grandpa said to me. I nodded. "Oh no," I nodded quickly. I was as embarrassed as I was at that time. A 6-year-old child, where have you ever seen such a scene? At that time, my soul was about to scare away. When my grandfather saw me like this, he quickly stroked him on my head and said to me cautiously, "Remember. Don't go out on this September 15th from now on. It's strange that you never pee at night before. I'll find a local prescription for you to treat it later. But remember, don't go out on this day every year." My grandfather said to me seriously, his expression was not even joking. I nodded heavily, and then I fell asleep that day. However, after I finished sleeping, my grandfather didn't know what he was busy with. All I knew was that he took out a yellow paper note with words that I couldn't understand and pasted it on my body. That night I slept soundly, even the ghostly images lingered in my mind, and I didn't feel any panic at all. Chapter 2. The World of Ghosts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, I got up beautifully and saw blood streaks in my grandfather's eyes. He seemed to have been awake since last night, but I slept soundly. When he saw me wake up, he touched my head and asked me, "Xuanpu, how did you sleep last night?" Grandpa smiled and touched my head, feeling his thick hands and a sense of security. I also nodded and said to Grandpa, "Grandpa, I slept very peacefully last night." "And Grandpa, what is this you posted for me?" I replied happily and then pointed to the yellow paper filled with runes that my grandfather had pasted on my left arm. Grandpa's wrinkled face looked at the runes he had drawn. He seemed somewhat dissatisfied and frowned, but he still smiled and said to me, "This is an exorcism talisman drawn by Grandpa. Stick it on you, and ghosts won't dare to touch you." My grandfather said he gave me another kiss on the face. I have been living with him since I was young, and my grandmother has never been aware of any trace. Grandpa said that my grandmother went up a mountain and hasn't come back for a long time. My parents work outside all year round, so I rely on my grandfather for survival. Grandpa naturally loves me dearly and doesn't let me suffer any harm. He gave me a kiss on the face, and the stubble pricked my face, causing me some pain. I felt the itching and pain on my face, so I couldn't help but spit out my tongue and said to my grandfather, "Grandpa, your beard is itching me so much, and it's time for you to cut it." "Grandpa," I said, but Grandpa didn't care at all. In his eyes, it seemed like a small matter. Indeed, it's just a small matter in itself, and I unintentionally joked with my grandfather. He said, "You little rascal, you're still saying that Grandpa's beard hurts me, and you'll grow a beard when you grow up." Grandpa said to me, and then he took out a piece of jade from the elderly wooden cabinet by the bedside. The jade was worn with a red thread and its body was very emerald green, like an extremely precious thing. I looked at it with great curiosity, and the next moment my grandfather brought the jade to my neck. I took the opportunity to touch the emerald green jade, which felt a bit cold to the touch, but holding it in hand is very comfortable. I really enjoyed it and carefully observed it. I didn't expect the jade to emit a faint light. I am very curious that the sunlight shining through the window makes the jade shine even more brightly. Grandpa looked at me and couldn't put down my love for this jade, so he said, "Xuanpu, this jade has been given to you. From now on, you can take this jade with you and keep it safe. As for the affairs of those demons and ghosts, don't worry about them. You must stay away from them well." Grandpa said his expression was very serious. After seeing Grandpa's serious expression, I couldn't help but be taken aback. My hand caressing the emerald stopped, and I suddenly remembered what happened last night. My expression also became a bit scared, but there was also curiosity in it. I looked at my serious grandfather and asked curiously, "Grandpa, although there are very few people living in our town, why hasn't it been demolished?" And the ghost from last night also appeared in the town. We should move out quickly. I asked my grandfather and touched my head, and he said to me, this town is something that ordinary people can't even notice. It's made up of gossip. It's intricate and complex, and the mountains and rivers outside of this period also correspond to gossip, extending this gossip formation even more perfectly. And there are a large number of ghosts and monsters in this formation. They were suppressed by one of the ghost formations in this gossip formation. Your grandfather and I have been suppressing this monster here for many years, so I cannot leave here. And this is still a paradise, where most of the ghosts and monsters suppressed here are the original residents. Setting them free will cause trouble. My grandfather said that the doubts that had been sealed in my heart for many years were finally resolved. It was then that I realized that my grandfather was actually a Taoist with profound knowledge in suppressing ghosts and monsters. At that time, I clearly didn't know my grandfather was very powerful. I continued to ask him, Grandpa, why didn't you kill all these ghosts and monsters? I said that my grandfather was very surprised when he heard my words, but in his description, most of the ghosts and monsters were extremely vicious. He smiled and then touched my head. Keep talking. Ghosts can be good or bad, and they also have wisdom. The longer a ghost lives or the stronger a ghost is, the more spiritual they will be. They were once humans and will survive like humans. Even after death, some of them still retain their original memories, so we cannot kill this ghost. As for the ghosts that Grandpa told you before, they are all extremely vicious and evil ghosts. Grandpa said. I nodded because yesterday the ghost was indeed walking upstream like the pedestrians on the street. Although some ghosts let out mournful screams, that was only a small part. Grandpa, why did you ask me to forget about ghosts and monsters? I asked again, but Grandpa's face became very gloomy. He rarely treats me like this, but as soon as he does, I know Grandpa is angry. But this time, Grandpa sighed and said to me, Xuanpu, if you really want to know about this matter, then I need to see if you are destined to be involved in it. This is the medicine that Grandpa prepared for you in the morning. From the moment you drink it, if you haven't forgotten about it, Grandpa will tell you everything. Grandpa said to me. I looked at the bowl of medicine in Grandpa's hand, which was emerald green and similar to the jade I was carrying, but it looked thick and disgusting. Grandpa looked at me with a stern gaze, and I also looked at Grandpa, as if I didn't drink it. I couldn't know everything. So I took the bowl of medicine from Grandpa's hand with great determination, and started drinking it with a thud. From the moment the medicine slipped into my stomach, I realized that the worst tasting medicine in the world than traditional Chinese medicine was the one that my grandfather had personally prepared. Grandpa watched as I finished drinking the medicine. Even the bottom of the bowl was clean. He nodded in satisfaction, but after I finished drinking, I just hiccuped and then, like nothing else, blinked with Grandpa. Grandpa watched me blink quickly, and I stared at my big eyes and followed Grandpa. Grandpa, what's wrong with you? I asked my grandfather, but he collapsed as if he was facing an unacceptable fact. Grandpa sighed and then said to me, It seems that you haven't forgotten that, Grandpa, so let me tell you why he didn't let you come into contact with ghosts. Grandpa said there was a fairy-like feeling on his weathered face, but as a young person, I don't know what Grandpa is thinking in his heart at this moment. Perhaps Grandpa had thought about all the painful things he had thought about in his lifetime, but he still couldn't hold back the sadness in his heart. He sighed, and I only felt my grandfather's whole body droop when he sighed. His gaze at me was filled with reluctance, pity, and love. Many expressions that I wouldn't normally see appeared in my grandfather's eyes, and it was only then that I realized there must be something big going on. Grandpa finally touched my head and sighed again, saying, I don't want you to come into contact with ghosts. I don't want you to follow the same path as Grandpa and me. Since I started catching ghosts, Grandpa and I have been dealing with ghosts all my life without any peace. But you are still young, and you never expected to encounter ghosts and monsters at such a young age. So the hexagram that Grandpa calculated for you last night is indeed true. It seems that you can never escape the fate of dealing with ghosts. Grandpa said. I could tell from his expression that he was feeling uncomfortable, but I still kept my eyes wide open. I didn't understand anything about Grandpa's statement, all I knew was that he was very sad at the time. But after Grandpa was sad for a while, he improved. Although he had been picking herbs on the mountain or cooking some strange things for me during those days, hoping to make me forget or make me do some strange actions, I never forgot about the strange thing. He didn't give up until he persisted for 2 or 3 years. Chapter 3. Formal Entry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 years later, although my grandfather still occasionally helps me with divination to see if I have any connection with ghost hunting, he no longer carries any hope, and even becomes numb. He felt very uncomfortable about the fact that I was destined to catch ghosts, as if it was something that would surely cost my life. But for 3 years, he never found a way. So he decided that instead of letting me forget about this matter and not participating, it would be better for me to have the strength to protect myself. 3 years later, one morning, my grandfather pulled me to the bamboo forest on a small mountain in our town. Our town is surrounded by mountains and rivers, and the environment is very beautiful. Although there are very few people living here, they have been living here for generations. My grandfather pulled me into a bamboo forest on a small mountain, and today he decided to teach me some knowledge about ghosts and monsters. I saw my grandfather standing on a stone in the bamboo forest, looking at me below. He was holding a white brush in his hand and shaking it, as if an old Taoist was teaching a young Taoist to start. He shook the brush and then said to me, "Zhang Xuanpu, would you like to enter the gate of Qingqing Mountain?" Grandpa shook the dust and said to me solemnly, but as I looked at him, although he was holding a feather duster in his hand, he didn't look like that long-bearded old Taoist. "Grandpa, isn't that too unusual for you? Taoists have long beards and long hair, but now you see that beards are short. Although your hair is very long, Grandpa, it doesn't look like an old Taoist. Does Grandpa insist on making it so formal?" When I said my grandfather was looking at me, he was also stunned for a moment. He didn't expect me to be so nonsensical when I was apprentice. "Xuanpu, would you like to enter the gate of Qingqing Mountain?" Grandpa didn't say much, so he reorganized himself and asked me again. My grandfather rarely forces me to do things twice when I don't want to, so I also cooperate with him. Disciple Zhang Xuanpu is willing to enter the gate of Qingqing Mountain. I said I didn't forget to give a gift. Grandpa nodded in satisfaction and turned it into the stone he occupied. He slowly walked down and looked at me, then smiled and nodded, just like in the story he told me. He gave me one. Tao is the name of Tao that one possesses. I see that you are naturally clever, why not give you the title Divine Machine? Grandpa said that after hearing this name, I felt a bit disgusted, but I still nodded. After all, Grandpa is quite old, and I still have to respect his opinion. Seeing me nod, Grandpa laughed heartily and then disappeared from his previous dignified attitude. Finally, he came to me and said, "Well, now that you have joined Qingqing Mountain, let me tell you about the rules in this way." Grandpa said, and then pointed to the jade I was carrying. I followed my grandfather's gaze and looked at the emerald green jade on my chest. I fondly touched it and said to my grandfather, "Grandpa, what's the purpose of giving this jade to me?" I asked my grandfather and he also helped me solve my doubts. He was originally planning to talk about this matter earlier, but now we hit it off and I perked up my ears to listen to his explanation. "Originally, Grandpa, I didn't want you to interfere in this ghost-catching matter, but now that you're interfering, Grandpa, I can't do anything about it. This jade was given to you before to prevent you from being harmed by ghosts and monsters. This is also a tribute from Grandpa to you. Secondly, Grandpa wanted to forcibly change his fate of dealing with ghosts for a lifetime, hoping to make you forget about it. However, the heavenly way refused, and I had no choice. Therefore, today I will teach you my skills until you learn them." Grandpa said. I was very excited to hear this, because in Grandpa's story, those Taoists are all very powerful, and they are all immortal with a feeling of immortality. This has always been lingering in my heart. I am very excited and eager to learn from my grandfather, but he told me that the first step is to chop bamboo. Grandpa walked up to me, picked up a machete, and slashed at the bamboo. I saw that with this slash, the bamboo broke directly, and I was immediately stunned. At that time, when I was 9 years old, I watched my grandfather cut bamboo with one knife and was extremely surprised because the bamboo was thicker than my legs. If you want to catch ghosts, you first need to cultivate yourself. The first step of this cultivation is for Grandpa to teach you how to chop bamboo. When you can chop bamboo to the point where it breaks with just one blow, Grandpa can then proceed to the next step of training. Grandpa walked up to me and said to me, then he put the machete in my hand. I felt the weight of the machete, which was probably 5 or 6 pounds. At that time, I had to work hard to hold it, let alone chop it. But when I looked at Grandpa, he was very serious and didn't seem to be joking at all. I walked heavily to an upright bamboo with a machete in my hand. I followed my grandfather's example and swung it, but when the machete landed on the bamboo, it broke free from my hand and almost hit my foot on the ground. At that time, my heart was beating so fast that I never expected my grandfather to solve something with just one blow, but I had to put in so much effort. Grandpa looked at my embarrassed appearance and laughed. He walked up to me, picked up the knife, and then chopped back at the bamboo that I hadn't cut. I saw Grandpa wielding his knife and chopping down the bamboo with just one strike, while the bamboo slowly fell down. When Grandpa chopped, there was no vibration in the blade, just like chopping melons and vegetables, and the resulting blade was as smooth as a horizontal plane. This bamboo chopping not only relies on strength, but also on skills. Bamboo is inherently resilient. At the moment of chopping, if one cannot reach the same level of vibration as the bamboo, they will be bounced up by the bamboo. Only by unleashing their full body strength and then chopping it off with one blow can they achieve the effect of chopping the bamboo with one blow. My grandfather said to me, then he patted my shoulder and handed me the knife. I took the heavy knife again, but I almost missed it and dropped it to the ground. My grandfather smiled at the corner of his mouth and asked me to practice well, while I rested on the side. I recall what my grandfather just said, and it was indeed very reasonable. However, my strength did not meet the requirements of chopping down bamboo. It can be said that adults need 5 or 6 knives to cut it. I couldn't help but feel discouraged. After all, where did I have such great power, and my grandfather said how to gather all my strength to chop down that bamboo. I felt puzzled all the time, but my grandfather had already fallen asleep on that huge stone, and there was nothing I could do. My grandfather was already asleep, and I didn't want to argue with him, so I decided to explore. I chopped fiercely at a bamboo, using a force of 9 oxen and 2 tigers, but either it bounced off my knife or it hurt my hand. Throughout the morning, I am always struggling with this bamboo. Bamboo, with its resilient properties, has been tormenting me for half a day. Finally, I decided to let it go. I put the knife aside and, while my grandfather wasn't paying attention, I decided to catch some wild rabbits and come back to roast them. We have been living here for a long time, and I have learned many skills. My skills are quite agile. I wandered around this mountain for a long time, and finally discovered my prey. Chapter 4. Ghosts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I found a rabbit, which was hidden in a bushes. Although it was very secretive, it still couldn't escape my gaze. My grandfather and I went hunting in the mountains all year round, and we already knew where the rabbit was hiding, and what kind of hiding method it was. So in my eyes, this rabbit has become a nail in the flesh. I took a bamboo bough I made myself and prepared to pull it full, shooting at the rabbit, but the rabbit seemed to have noticed me. The next moment, it suddenly darted out of the grass. I am very angry. This bamboo forest is easy to get lost. It took me a long time to get out of the bamboo forest, and my grandfather who came to this place set up a maze. If it weren't for me and my grandfather hunting here often, would have gotten lost long ago. But I finally ran into a rabbit and now it's gone, which makes me feel really uncomfortable. As I didn't have lunch, my stomach growled and I decided to walk deeper to see if there were any other prey. As I walked, I stumbled into the depths of this forest. I have never been to this grandpa before, nor have I been with him. I heard Grandpa say that the animals here are very fierce, and there seem to be ghosts and monsters living here. At that time, I thought Grandpa was scaring me, but as I walked deeper, the forest became even darker. Although the sky was at noon on the day, the more I walked into the forest, the darker it became. Even as I walked, I slowly lost sight of the light. I heard something moving in the grass, and the hissing sound seemed like a snake. I feel a bit nervous in my heart, but I am not afraid of snakes because my grandfather has been taking various medicines for me since I was young, just to help me resist various toxins such as poisonous insects. I am now invincible to all kinds of poison, but I am still afraid. After all, giving a snake a bite would also hurt. I walked cautiously, fearing that I might startle the venomous snakes and be bitten by dozens of them. Even if I were immune to all kinds of venom, I would still be bitten to death by these snakes. I was walking cautiously when suddenly a big bite came towards me. I knew it was a snake, but luckily I reacted quickly enough. I took out a long spear that had already been sharpened and poked it 7 inches into the snake's body, then it fell to the ground. I was startled when I saw this snake, which was over 1 meter long. Over the years, my grandfather and I have been running from the mountains, which can be considered as having much stronger physical strength and endurance than our peers. However, I have never seen such a big snake before, and even after being hit 7 inches by me, it still has a very strong force. I tightly inserted it to prevent it from moving, but it kept struggling and I almost couldn't control it. I exerted all my strength until the snake slowly stopped moving, and then I released my hand. I was already exhausted and sat down on the ground. I heard my grandfather say that the larger the snake, the less toxic it is. I inferred that this type of snake must not be toxic. I decided to go forward and check what kind of snake it was, but when I checked, I was shocked. I thought this snake wasn't venomous, but it's actually a bamboo leaf green snake. When I observed carefully, it made my hands tremble with fear. I couldn't guarantee that my grandfather would keep me safe from all kinds of poison. Even the poison of such a huge bamboo leaf green couldn't have an effect on me, but I dare infer that it is definitely strange for this bamboo leaf green to grow so big. I swallowed a mouthful of saliva and didn't dare to move forward. I was about to step back, but when I looked back, I didn't even recognize the way back. At this moment, I realized that I had lost my way and my grandfather had never brought me to this place before. I walked in without permission now, only to find myself lost. I became anxious and tried to call out to my grandfather. I shouted loudly over and over again, but no one heard me. Only a voice echoed through the mountains and forests. I was extremely scared. It was very gloomy here, and the cold was very strong. I felt the cold here. There was a rustling sound in the grass near me, and I knew it was a snake. I heard more than one rustling sound, so I quickly became alert. I patrolled around and found a stone. I stood up. It was this action that countless snakes became alert. They seemed to have locked onto me and surrounded me one after another. I didn't understand why, but soon I understood. I looked at the stone standing under my feet, with blood on top of it, and there seemed to be many animal corpses next to it. I understood that this stone was the gathering place for all snakes, and at that moment, I was like prey, surrounded by snakes on top of this giant stone. Countless snakes slowly approached me, spitting out their cold snake-like instincts. As I watched so many snakes slowly move towards me, I felt like I was really going to die. Those snakes are scrutinizing me, as if scrutinizing prey. I didn't move, stood still, and continued to shout for my grandfather, but he didn't come over. At this moment, I thought about countless things in my mind, thinking that my ghost-catching life had not yet begun, and I would be buried here. Just as countless snakes were flying towards me and biting, I could only hear a huge roar. The snakes were all running away in all directions, and even the flying snake quickly landed on the ground, swimming away. In an instant, a whole place was covered, and all the snakes disappeared. I was very surprised and thought I was saved, but the next moment came something even more desperate for me. At the age of 9, after experiencing the siege of a pack of snakes, I unexpectedly saw a ghost that my grandfather had said countless times according to legend. My mind is like a lantern, constantly reminiscing about what my grandfather told me. They say there are many different types of ghosts. Among them, ordinary ghosts generally cannot cause damage, but there is also a fierce ghost derived from ordinary ghosts, which is the fierce ghost. Ligui has a mouth full of fangs and is very fierce. Grandpa didn't explain to me in detail what Ligui looks like, but it goes without saying, because when I saw Ligui's appearance, I knew what Ligui looked like, even more terrifying than all the ghosts I saw 3 years ago. At that moment, I already knew what it meant to be ruined. That ghost has a body that is over 2 meters tall. He walked towards me with every step being very powerful. I only felt a sudden jump in my heart because with each step he took, his footprints would be reflected on the ground. It can be imagined how terrifying the monster in front of me was. My heart was pounding wildly, and he slowly approached me. His terrifying eyes were fixed, and I couldn't forget them until today. He approached me, his every step was slow, but I had no doubt he could kill me. I felt his immense pressure, and there seemed to be a hint of gas around his body. I could see it, but I knew it. Seeing it doesn't change anything, I'll be ruined. Roar. The fierce ghost roared and rushed towards me. I hurriedly retreated from the stone, and I kept retreating. He also kept scratching me, and as I retreated, I sat down. At that moment, my whole heart felt like I was about to end. At this moment, the fierce ghost stretched out its paw and grabbed at me. I closed my eyes, raised my hand, and prepared to resist. Of course, I knew this was a useless move. With this paw, I would die. But the next moment, a fierce tiger flew out of the grass and directly rushed towards the fierce ghost, knocking it to the side. When I fell, the fierce tiger didn't forget to roar. I had closed my eyes, but in this sudden moment, I didn't die. I opened my eyes and found that the fierce tiger was fighting against the fierce ghost. I saw that fierce tiger with a very strange appearance, even with 2 horns on its head. I didn't pay much attention and was about to run, but the next moment, the fierce tiger was thrown away by this ghost. Moreover, upon closer inspection, it seemed that the tiger had suffered quite a few injuries. I felt it was over. Although for some reason, they got into a fight, now in this moment, the tiger was instantly killed. I was just about to run away from the fierce ghost when I ended the battle and continued walking towards me. This time, I knew I couldn't run anymore, so I stood there, my body trembling and running was useless. The speed this guy showed before completely overwhelmed me. The fierce ghost once again attacked me. This time, he jumped down in the air with a fierce force, ready to strike and kill me. I closed my eyes, and this time, he was finally going to kill me. I feel unwilling, I don't want to just die like this, but... Chapter 5. Grandpa's Action. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I closed my eyes again, feeling like I was about to die, but after a long time, I didn't feel any pain. I only heard the fierce ghost roar and then flew out. The fierce ghost made countless water floats on the ground, flying dozens of meters away. I opened my eyes and a figure appeared in front of me. He was not tall, somewhat old, and even hunchbacked, but he looked so friendly in my eyes. Looking at that figure, I knew he had saved me. Xuanpu, I asked you to chop bamboo. You're good, you came here. If Grandpa doesn't come now, are you going to die? The figure said it was my grandfather. I saw my grandfather very excited, and I ignored his criticism and hugged him directly. Grandpa used to be extremely angry, but looking at me like this, he calmed down and caressed my head before saying, "Look at how restless you are. Where are you going next time? Tell Grandpa not to be so playful and go out without permission, okay? It's so dangerous." Fortunately, nothing happened, otherwise I'll make this ghost look good. Grandpa stroked my head and said that he was very kind when he touched me, but when he saw that ghost, he was full of murderous intent, like a fierce king looking at that fierce ghost. Originally, Li Gui didn't know why he flew out, but after seeing his grandfather, he inexplicably charged up again. But Grandpa just waved the dust, and in the next moment, the fierce ghost exploded and dissipated. I stared blankly at my grandfather's strength, which was so strong that I immediately admired him. Whether I was in my panic or lingering in my body, my grandfather seemed to notice it and caressed my head, as if trying to dispel my fear. My tears flowed out, forming a tear stream. Looking back, I really felt ashamed for myself at that time. But at that time, I was indeed quite helpless. My grandfather touched my head and gently wiped away the tears on my face. He cared about me and didn't notice that the big tiger next to him was injured. After I regained my mood, I said directly to my grandfather, "Grandpa, just now. Just when I was about to be killed by the fierce ghost, a big tiger saved me. Look, he's injured now. Can you save him?" I said, and then I pointed my finger at the tiger lying on the ground. Its abdomen was severely injured and its huge claw marks hit it. The entire abdomen was opened, and the internal organs were clearly visible. It flowed out with bright red blood, and when Grandpa saw the huge tiger, his eyes were stunned and he looked at me incredulously. "You said it saved you just now." Grandpa's face was filled with shock. I don't know why, but I felt that my grandfather was so shocked and speechless at the first sight of the tiger. He calmed his emotions for a moment and then said to me. I nodded and asked my grandfather to go and save the tiger, but my grandfather was there. Before I could finish speaking, he rushed straight to the tiger and took out various medicines from his pocket. He fed the tiger all at once. The next moment, the tiger moved its claws, and slowly its flesh and blood healed at a visible speed to the naked eye. The tiger let out a heavy gasp, and as its wounds slowly healed, it surprisingly stood up. Grandpa looked at the tiger and said to me, "It seems that you have a connection with this Qilin, and indeed you have a connection with this ghost hunter. This tiger is not a tiger, he is what I call the auspicious beast Qilin." When Grandpa talked about the Qilin, his face was filled with a smile because I was saved by the Qilin, which proves that I have received Qilin's recognition. After listening to my grandfather's story, I couldn't help but open my mouth wide. I said, "Why does this tiger look so strange? It turns out to be a Qilin, and the tiger doesn't look like this either." I touched the head of this tiger Qilin. And the Qilin seemed to enjoy being touched by me, and it also rubbed against my body. It wasn't fur, but scales, but these scales felt fuzzy to the touch. I caressed the Qilin and it felt very tactile. I treated the fork as if it were a little pet, but he didn't hesitate at all. Instead, he interacted intimately with me. Grandpa was really shocked when he saw this scene. He didn't expect the legendary unicorn to be so beloved by my side, even willing to be touched by me. "Xuanpu, it seems he really likes you. Since you have a connection with him, why don't you just make a contract and you'll be his master then?" I touched the Qilin, and my grandfather said something like this. After hearing what my grandfather said, I felt a bit unwilling to be the owner of the Qilin. I would rather be his friend, after all, he saved me, but the Qilin seemed to understand my grandfather's words. It nodded excitedly. I was surprised to see his action, but the next moment, a light emanated from the Qilin's body, fitting onto my palm. It rubbed its head against my palm, and the next moment, a mark appeared in my palm. This mark also appeared on my forehead, and in the end, I felt as if I had some connection with it. When I saw this scene, my grandfather was even more surprised. He didn't know what to say on the side, because the Qilin actually took the initiative to sign a contract with me, making him my subordinate. So speaking in this way, it's really unbelievable. Xuanpu, this is your great opportunity. Grandpa said in shock, while I looked at him with my eyes open. I didn't know anything. I was only 9 years old at the time and had no idea what it would be like to be contracted by this auspicious beast. Grandpa was just extremely happy. He seemed to have changed his mind. Initially, he thought it was not beneficial for me to fall into the art of catching ghosts, but now it seems that it's still okay. Perhaps I will be the first genius on the path of cultivating immortals, catching ghosts, and driving away demons in the future. Grandpa's excitement is self-evident, but I couldn't seem to show any interest as I watched him. I was just curious about how Grandpa found me just now. After Kiran finished signing the contract with me, I looked at my grandfather and asked, Grandpa, how did you find me? I'm clearly so far away from you. I asked my grandfather for a flick on my head, as if it was a punishment for me sneaking out. I felt a slight pain on my forehead, covered my grandfather's forehead, and the next moment I started speaking. You little thing, running around everywhere makes it difficult for Grandpa to find you. If it weren't for the protective jade that Grandpa gave you, Grandpa wouldn't even know your location. If Grandpa didn't dare to come, then the jade might have saved your life. Grandpa said, and I looked at the jade on my chest. Sure enough, it was still emitting green light, which I had not seen before. However, shortly after I saw it emitting green light, it gradually dissipated. Grandpa looked at me now and said again. You can't sneak out again next time, but this time you're also a blessing in disguise. Since this Qilin recognizes you as the master, you should treat it well in the future. Grandpa said, and I nodded heavily. I fully agree with Grandpa's statement this time. I will not disobey Grandpa's command again. After all, I have learned a profound lesson. The Qilin besides seemed to understand what Grandpa was saying, and then let out a few proud cries. So, my grandfather and I returned home in the mountains and forests, and we also brought a Qilin with us. At first, I thought the Qilin was too big and troublesome, but I never expected that it could even change its size freely. When I returned home, I held the Qilin in my palm. At this moment, the Qilin was as cute as a little milk dog. When I touched it, it also obediently rubbed against my arm. But when my grandfather touched it, he would extend his mouth full of sharp teeth. Grandpa had no choice but to let me take care of the Qilin. And I also love this Qilin very much. I play with it every day, feed it food, and that's how my grandfather taught me my ability to catch ghosts and cultivate immortals. Day after day passed like this. Chapter 6. Introduction to Ghosts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Today, my grandfather was teaching me knowledge on the mountaintop with me. Before that, I followed my grandfather's cultivation method, practicing deep squats, running, or practicing swordsmanship every day to become proficient and improve my physical fitness. And my grandfather gradually began to teach me about ghosts. This ghost is born out of people's resentment after death. Some ghosts have more resentment and become fierce ghosts, different from ordinary ghosts. They are extremely aggressive. When we encounter such ghosts, we need to be careful. We need to guard against them and subdue them without letting them harm people. If their sins are too deep, they will be directly killed. Do you understand? On the mountaintop, my grandfather sat on a large stone and said to me below. I looked at my grandfather, and then I was a bit distracted, but I still listened to this sentence. After listening to what my grandfather said, I couldn't help but think of the day when the ghost was chasing me and almost killed me. I asked my grandfather. That fierce ghost seems to have a black aura on his body. Grandpa, you should have seen it, right? I asked my grandfather. He nodded and then he said to me. That's exactly what I'm going to talk about next. This ghost is divided into different levels, from ordinary ghosts to fierce ghosts, then to ghost generals, ghost gods, ghost kings, ghost emperors, and even ghost emperors. They divide them all the way to distinguish ghosts. And this fierce ghost is just the weakest ghost, but also the most vicious ghost. Compared to ordinary ghosts, they are very strong, and compared to those ghosts, they appear very weak. Grandpa said. I nodded heavily. These are all knowledge points. In the future, if I encounter someone who cannot be defeated, I will have to run away. I don't want to be killed by ghosts. Seeing me nod, Grandpa continued speaking. The ghost you encountered is one of the more powerful among the fierce ghosts. He is about to be promoted to the rank of Ghost General. To determine if he has any signs of promotion, you need to look at whether he has black mist on his body. If black mist appears, it is very serious, and there is a high probability that he will be promoted. Once promoted to the rank of Ghost, dealing with Grandpa requires 3 moves. However, this is not the guy who can make Grandpa worth taking out weapons. The guy who can make Grandpa take out weapons is at least the Ghost Emperor. Grandpa said that I was a bit stunned when I looked at his proud and coquettish appearance. I didn't expect that despite his age, Grandpa still likes to show off in front of me so much. But I still applauded and said, Grandpa is really amazing. My grandfather was so happy when I said this. He was almost about to come down from that stone and kiss me, but he continued to say it. Although this ghost is divided into many levels, the most powerful ghost we can see is only the Ghost General, because other ghosts can't come out of the underworld anymore. After a person dies, their souls will sink into the underworld, and few souls will emerge from the underworld. Those particularly powerful ghosts dare not come out of the underworld because their breath is too strong. Once detected by the Ghost King and Ghost Emperor in the underworld, the ghosts will be directly destroyed. Grandpa said. After hearing these words, I breathed a sigh of relief. I almost thought that the world was going to be in chaos, and my grandfather stroked his beard. But now the underworld probably no longer exists, and most ghosts have disappeared from this world. Otherwise, with such advanced technology, people would still believe that ghosts exist. Grandpa said this, and upon hearing it, I stared blankly at him. Grandpa, since all the ghosts have disappeared, why do ghost hunters like you still exist? After I asked my grandfather, he laughed heartily and said to me, although all sects of Taoism have declined, our Taoism will still exist. Although the underworld has disappeared and all ghosts have disappeared, there are still some ghosts, and our remaining Taoism has played a role. We drive away ghosts and ward off evil spirits. In addition, we also cultivate immortality in order to achieve immortality, which is the meaning that Taoism will still exist. If there is no Tao in the world, then there will be no ghosts, demons, and everything else. After listening to this, I nodded because at this moment I finally had a deeper understanding of the Tao. Those who seek the Tao seek eternal life, either to benefit the world or to be indifferent to the world. Grandpa seemed to realize what I had understood and nodded in satisfaction. He didn't ask me what I had truly realized, because everyone has their own way, and I don't need to understand Grandpa, nor does Grandpa need to understand me. So, Grandpa continued. This ghost lurks around us and is difficult for people to detect. Moreover, most people cannot see ghosts. Only those with our Heavenly Master bloodline can see ghosts, and ordinary Taoists cannot see ghosts before practicing. You have the Heavenly Master bloodline and yin-yang eyes to see where ghosts are. My grandfather said I had another intuitive feeling, and I nodded because I once told my friends that I had seen ghosts, but they didn't believe me, and even after many years of living, they had seen ghosts many times. When playing with friends at night, you will also see ghosts. But they didn't see it. After the age of 6, my friends stopped playing with me and called me crazy. Some people say that I always scare them. But I am really sad. Grandpa knows about this, but he hasn't said it yet. Now he covers his mouth and smiles, then says, if you are ready to enter the Tao, then you should maintain a meaningless attitude towards the eyes of ordinary people, which is the first requirement for entering the Tao. Grandpa said that after listening to this, I also nodded. Stay away from the secular world, be pure and inactive, and follow the wind in your heart to become the way. Follow the original intention, follow the destiny, follow the wind, and let nature take its course. This is the way my grandfather told me. This is also a widely circulated Taoist ideology, which I did not understand. My grandfather also told me that there is no need to understand because everyone seeks a different way. I nodded and finally finished this class. At noon, I decided to go back for dinner and wanted to find bamboo shoots, but my grandfather smiled in front of me. Seeing him smile like this, I knew I was done. I am already 12 years old this year, and my grandfather has become increasingly demanding of my training. Grandpa hasn't taught me how to make inner pills yet. Take in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. But it has already given me 8 abdominal muscles and 2 chest muscles to practice. I know my grandfather wants to lay a solid foundation for me, but his daily training really makes me vomit. From running around the mountain from the beginning, I still have to carry water and run around the mountain. Even if he doesn't let me drop a drop of water, I feel very speechless. And according to my grandfather, the energy of cultivation is thin now. If there is no good body, it is impossible to explore the vitality of this heaven and earth. Only by continuously training and exercising my body and mind can I feel the vitality of this heaven and earth. Moreover, when I exercise, the vitality of the earth will slowly fall into my body. I also followed my grandfather's instructions and completed today's task before slowly dragging my tired body back home. The Qilin is still welcoming me, it is very happy. After seeing me back, it habitually rubbed against my side, but I touched its head and gave it a piece of fish jerky. This guy loves to eat fish jerky, and I always have to prepare a lot of fish jerky for him. But today I was too tired, and after feeding him a piece, he collapsed. Grandpa looked at me with a smile on his face. He put a pill into my mouth, and the next moment I was resurrected with blood. Just now, everything I did was faked because I knew my grandfather's inner pill had a very strong effect. As long as I ate it, I could recover very quickly. Now, not only do I not feel tired, but I also feel immense strength. Grandpa looked at me, full of doting on me. Although he knew I was doing it intentionally, he still gave me pills, and I was indeed very tired. My grandfather touched my head and asked me to go to the table for dinner. I listened to my grandfather's words and sat down. Soon, I finished this big bowl of rice, and the dishes on the table were clean. Chapter 7. Minor Achievements. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Day after day, year after year, I finally started practicing. I followed my grandfather's mnemonic and meditated and breathed every day. Finally, when I was 14 years old, I miraculously felt the warmth in my abdomen. I know, I'm getting started. After I achieved this achievement, I couldn't help but be overjoyed that the Qilin beside me also jumped up, as if feeling the bond between us deepened. I looked at Qilin in confusion, and Qilin looked at me. It seems that the induction between us is driving us both to do so. Are you saying you want to eat dried fish? I said to Qilin because just now I seemed to feel that Qilin said to me, I want to eat dried fish. Qilin nodded. Its chubby face was filled with joy. I looked at it, it seems that this little guy can now communicate with me. After signing this contract, our communication has become smoother. Okay, let's go fishing now. I said and then picked up the harpoon I had prepared. I have known for a long time that the purpose of this Qilin following me out to practice every day is not so simple. He always pesters me for dried fish, so I will insert fish every day after practicing. Today is no exception, of course, little Qilin can even have a conversation with me today. From this point on, I am very surprised. However, this kind of conversation only exists in our minds, and I ran quickly to prepare to run towards the river and stream. But the Qilin is always in front of me, constantly urging me. Hurry up and always find me slow. I can't help but feel aggrieved. Compared to my 2 legs, how can they be the same? Although we were helpless, we quickly arrived at the riverbank. Looking at the rolling stream, I couldn't help feeling strange. Normally, the stream was calm, but today when I came here, the stream seemed to have gone crazy and the water was very turbulent. I stopped, but the Qilin didn't stop. Seeing me not moving and looking at the stream, it couldn't help but feel anxious. It seemed to want to eat dried fish. At this moment, it sent me a message, probably meaning to hurry up. I sighed and felt that the stream was a bit turbulent, so I picked up the harpoon. Then he walked towards the stream. When I arrived at the stream, I noticed something was wrong because there seemed to be some kind of blood here. I took a sniff. Intuition tells me that this blood is definitely not ordinary blood. I have thought countless thoughts in my mind, and finally I know what kind of blood this is. This is the blood of a bear. There are actually bears here. Bears often fish by the stream, but surprisingly, there are animals that can compete with bears. I couldn't help but be surprised because speaking of giant bears is not just for fun. I can't beat a giant bear at all now, but it's terrifying to see a monster that can harm the bear. Plus, the river is so turbulent. I suddenly had a bad idea in my heart, and I quickly retreated. Qilin saw my movements and also retreated one after another. There was no movement with Lu Bian now, but I saw a bubble rising from where I had just stopped. Indeed, there is something here. I exclaimed in surprise, then picked up the harpoon in my hand and plunged towards the bubbling spot. The next moment, a mournful cry sounded, and a huge fish flew onto the shore. The splashing water splashed onto me and drove me straight out. I spat out the water in my mouth, and Qilin shook his head. Then our eyes turned to each other. This fish looked strange, with 4 legs, and its face was very ugly and ferocious. I thought this was what Grandpa called a demon. According to my grandfather, after death, there is a chance that humans will transform into ghosts, while demons are cultivated by those animals. Spirits and monsters are cultivated by plants, while demons are produced after humans have fallen. And a fallen person can only be a Taoist who cultivates, and only by falling can one become a demon. I looked at the huge fish in front of me, and I felt that it was not simple. I just started practicing today, but I already felt the strength of this fish. If divided by the level my grandfather said, this fish should be equivalent to that ordinary monster. Unlike ordinary ghosts, ordinary monsters have attack abilities. And his personality was also very fierce. The next moment, the fish tore at me directly, with a mouth full of fangs. The person looked very uncomfortable, and I dodged the blow one by one. At this moment, I will no longer be helpless like when I encountered a fierce ghost before. I took out the sword in my hand, which was given to me by my grandfather. My grandfather called it, slaying demons. I caressed the demon slayer and rushed out the next moment. Today, I will come to practice my hand with a small monster. My speed is very fast, which is the result of years of cultivation. Combined with my grandfather's pill, I have already reached an astonishing level. Although I can't beat the brown bear, I didn't have a weapon. Now that I have a weapon, this little monster is in my hands, and I can easily handle it. I flickered around the fish, and in the next moment, my sword pierced through its scales. The fish let out a painful roar, shook its tail, and spewed out a stream of water from its mouth. However, I dodged all of them, and saw that my Qilin also joined the battle. I saw the Qilin transform its body into its original size, but in recent years, it has actually grown a bit. Surprisingly, it has the size of an elephant. The Qilin fiercely bit down the huge monster fish, which was very slow and unable to dodge. The flesh and blood were blurred by this bite, but the Qilin was not satisfied at all. After it took the bite. After chewing it in its mouth, it felt that the meat was very good, so it spat out a ball of fire from its mouth. At this moment, Qilin thought about burning the fish for a better taste. With such a mentality, a flame of thousands of degrees shot out of Qilin's mouth. The strange fish was originally injured, but now it was burned by the flame sprayed out by Qilin at the wound, making it emit a huge roar. When I saw that the fish was about to be killed by Chelan, I didn't hesitate at all and stabbed the huge strange fish with a sword. The next moment, under the collision of flames and swords, this strange fish was undoubtedly killed by us. Looking at the bountiful spoils of war, I felt a sense of satisfaction in my heart. These spoils were very abundant, enough for the Chelan to eat for several days. Chelan looked at the loot with satisfaction and took a bite, then heated it with flames. The next moment, the fragrant fish smell spread throughout our noses. But this strange fish has a strong fishy smell. Chelan spat out the fish meat with great disdain, and then stepped on the ground with 2 feet. I laughed and took out a bottle of cumin from my pocket. I sprinkled cumin on top of the huge fish meat, which was 3 meters tall and 6 meters long. Only a small part of it was scattered by me with cumin, so I quickly snatched a small piece of fish meat from Chelan's mouth and started eating it. And I had already anticipated that the Chelan would swallow the whole piece of fish in the next moment. The fish had a delicate taste and tasted very delicious, so the 2 of us indulged in it. As for Grandpa, he couldn't eat any more. At this moment, Grandpa was at home, constantly shaking his divination. He seemed to notice something serious on his face, so he directly used his magic to send a letter over. I looked at the flying paper and pen, then opened them, and the next moment I froze. Chapter 8. Grandpa Leaving. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I received the letter from my grandfather, and when I opened it, the content on it shocked me. That handwriting is indeed Grandpa's handwriting, but I am very anxious because it says, Xuanpu, Grandpa, I'm leaving here. In the future, you need to practice well and remember to burn a few sticks of incense to suit the people in this town every day. When you're 18 years old, you can leave here, and then this will become an organized soul that won't run around. Perhaps it's a different level of underworld. Remember, you need to practice and burn incense every day, and also take care of yourself. Grandpa has something to attend to when you're 18 years old. You can come back to find Grandpa when you're 18 years old. You can only explore the outside world when you're 18 years old. It's still too early for you now, come back quickly. I've prepared food for you, and Grandpa will leave first. I couldn't help but run quickly towards the roof when I saw the letter. Although the mountains and forests were overgrown with thorns, I ran like a fish in water, and my footsteps were anxious, so my speed was also very fast. Although I ran home in 10 minutes, there was not a single person inside when I arrived. I pushed open the door and only saw the hot food on the table, as well as a cloth bag left for me by my grandfather. I opened it and found something inside that I had never seen before. There were red stacks on top of it. I infer that this should be some kind of currency, and it is very light and different from the copper coins my grandfather usually uses. After I opened this cloth bag, there was also a letter from my grandfather on it. I opened it again and saw it, and my grandfather wrote on it. If you go out, you can keep these dishes. There are about 300,000 yuan inside, which you will need when you go out when you are 18 years old. In addition, I have some broken silver here, which is also hidden in this cloth bag. There are also some magic weapons for exorcism and evil spirits, as well as techniques you will use in the future. Grandpa divined and found that Grandpa cannot keep them here. However, when you come to find Grandpa again when you are 18 years old, remember not to disobey his words. On the paper, it was written that I was lost in thought as I looked at it. My grandfather divined again. Although he divined every day, he didn't come up with any results. But today, his divination was very strange, as it allowed him to leave the town he had been guarding for decades. I felt novel, but I still suppressed my desire to find my grandfather. Since my grandfather said so, there must be a reason behind him. I sat down and looked at the note, lost in thought. Although there were still a few households living in this town, I didn't know what they usually do on a daily basis, and my grandfather didn't let me deal with those households. While I was eating, I suddenly noticed a note under the bowl, and I looked at it. I saw that the note above also mentioned it. Xuanpu, on weekdays. I don't let you deal with those few households these days because they are not actually humans. They are also ghosts, and they are a special kind of ghost among ghosts. They all think they haven't died. Learn from the people in weekdays, try to stay away from them as much as possible, it's very dangerous. The note was written on the one I saw, and I suddenly realized it. No wonder my grandfather said there was a ghost before seeing me, and they didn't believe it. My grandfather clearly knew, but he didn't say much and deliberately made them distance themselves from me. So that's the reason. I no longer hold grudges against my grandfather because everything he did was for my own good. I started eating, and the food my grandfather cooked was very delicious. It was the most delicious food my grandfather had ever cooked in all these years. However, since my grandfather left me, I still feel a bit uncomfortable. I was eating the food, feeling a bit absent-minded. Watching my grandfather leave me, I was really curious. What kind of divination did my grandfather make up and why did he leave me? I searched in the room and suddenly found something gossipy on the bed made of stone bricks. In the gossip, there is another turtle shell, and I picked up the turtle shell pattern, which is very delicate. Not only are the 12 zodiac signs engraved on it, but there are also various strange talismans engraved on it. When I looked at this hexagram, Grandpa made it very complex, and I couldn't understand how to read it. I flipped through the books my grandfather usually told me, and from them, I saw various strange formations that can greatly enhance my combat effectiveness. It can make oneself stronger and suppress ghosts and monsters. The transformation of each formation is very complex, centered around a certain direction or a certain direction. I can't understand it at all, and I haven't even figured out the most basic gossip positions. That's not to mention Grandpa's profound divination skills. I was groping for my grandfather's turtle shell when suddenly a faint golden light shone on it. I was so scared that I quickly let go of the turtle shell. As a result, the golden light from the turtle shell on the stone bed caused the entire gossip formation to turn. The last map appeared in front of me, and my heart skipped a beat at the time. I carefully explored the map in front of me, and upon seeing it, it turned out to be the map where our town is located. I looked at this map, which had various markings, including the most ferocious one. Although I am familiar with the whole town, there are still many places that I have not been to, especially those deep mountain and old forest grandfathers who usually do not allow me to go out. According to my grandfather, there are various monsters hidden in the deep mountains and forests, but they dare not approach us. We are isolated from the world here, and if we want to go out, we must pass through the deep mountains and forests. I took a look at the map left by my grandfather, and I looked over it. It seemed to mark the locations of various monsters, and all of them should have been explored by my grandfather one by one. I look at this map. Lost in thought, I was wondering why my grandfather left this map for me. The next moment, a light curtain appeared, and my grandfather actually projected onto it. Since you have already cracked this map, Grandpa has to admit that you can officially enter the Tao. Originally, Grandpa wanted to trap you in this town for a lifetime. But you unexpectedly activated this formation in the dark. I never thought it would be like this. I forcibly reversed the fate, but it still did not change. Since you have decided to enter the Tao will also keep you, and I cannot salvage it. Starting today, Grandpa will make a series of plans for you, and you must follow this plan every day. This map shows the locations of various monsters. When you can kill all these monsters, you can go out. I have calculated the time. In 4 years, if you can kill all these monsters, then you have the right to venture outside. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to survive in this life mountain since you were young without skills. When the time comes, you will go to Shanghai to find your fourth uncle. He holds a very high position in Shanghai, and people there call him the fourth uncle. As long as you go to Shanghai and find him, he will naturally recognize you. But if you can't even pass these levels, then Grandpa, I can only keep you here for a lifetime. After all, this is also the longest way to keep you alive. Once you go through this period of time, the world will definitely be in chaos. The grandfather's figure on the projection said to me. My first reaction was very novel, but later I listened carefully because this may be the last time I see my grandfather. I listened carefully to every word my grandfather said to me, and I wouldn't let go of anything he said to me. But after listening to these words, my heart surged. The places marked by my grandfather are at least haunted by ghosts and monsters, and I'm really scared. I'm afraid that if I'm not careful, I'll be like when I was chased by that fierce ghost before. But it's useless to be afraid. If I want to see the outside world and not be trapped here for a lifetime, I can only train according to my grandfather's method. But after this light curtain dissipates, I sat down and pondered carefully as the Qilin howled beside me. I didn't pay attention to it. This guy has already had 2 meals today. In addition to breakfast, he ate fish by the river and also had meals at home. Now he wants to ask me for dried small fish to eat. I can't bear to let my grandfather go. Even if my stomach is full, I still finish all the dishes my grandfather made for me. At this moment, I am meditating and practicing. I practiced according to my grandfather's method for a moment, and I dare not neglect it. From now on, I have been immersed in endless crazy training every day. Chapter 9. Ghosts in the Small Town. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A few months later, I still lived a plain and tasteless life, going fishing, hunting, or practicing every day. Everything was going on like this, and I longed to kill all the ghosts around the town by the age of 18, so that I could go out easily. I am looking forward to that day. Little Qilin follows me and eats delicious food every day. I go fishing every day, and occasionally a few monsters or ghosts appear, all of which are killed by me. As I delved deeper into the surroundings of the town, the ghosts and monsters I encountered became stronger and stronger. By 4 months later, following my grandfather's cultivation method, I had already achieved what he told me to build a foundation. Originally, I was still solidifying my foundation, but due to my impatience, I almost destroyed it. Later, when I was practicing, I slowed down. I thought little Qilin could only breathe fire, but now he can still emit lightning, which surprised me greatly. I follow the runes left by my grandfather every day. At this moment, I have already learned more than 50 ways to draw runes. What soul-restraining talismans, lightning-inducing talismans, fire-transforming talismans, and Lingfeng talismans. I learned to wait until I was 18 years old to go out, but one night, something strange happened again. That night was the night of the full moon on September 15th. It's strange to say that the moon will be full on September 15th here. When I was 6 years old before, the moon was round and I didn't feel much, but now when I am 14 years old and the moon is round, I feel something special. Because of the moon tonight, he was a bit cold and blinked like an eye. I was originally meditating and practicing in the middle of the night, striving to break through the foundation. I want to further immerse myself in concentration. But on that night, I couldn't gather well, and as soon as I condensed my gathered energy, it would dissipate. I thought this was a normal thing, but I didn't expect it to be abnormal. I searched all my grandfather's books but couldn't find this explanation until I saw his notes. When I saw that note, it made my hair stand on end, and it was already late at night. When I saw that note, I felt as if there was a hand behind me touching me, and a cold wind blew around me, making my back and body feel cold. Our seasons are constantly changing and different from the outside world. It can be said that we have violated ethics recently. I have read my grandfather's previous books outside, and I know all about military missiles and even smartphones. However, I never felt that it is strange for us to be different from the outside world this time. It wasn't until I grew older that I realized that the place I was in was really different from the outside world. If I were to put a normal person here, it would definitely go crazy. I looked at the notes my grandfather had written and suddenly felt a pair of hands grabbing me from behind. I was startled and the Kieran beside me also trembled. I turned around and saw nothing, but Cheelan was already gone. I was shocked. I thought I was having a blind eye, so I rubbed my eyes, but Cheelan still didn't see it. I was the only one left here, and I was very panicked. I quickly grabbed the demon-slaying sword. I hid in a corner where I received it, holding 5 or 6 demonic copper coins in my hand. There was still black dog blood sprinkled on it, and I used it to defend myself. At this moment, the emerald on my chest was already shining with a faint green light, and its light was constantly increasing. Suddenly, I heard the sound of countless fierce ghosts roaring from the street. At that moment, my nerves had already become extremely sensitive. I know I must have encountered a ghost, and it seems to be stronger than all the ghosts I have encountered before. He must have pulled me into his illusion. Come on, come on, come on, what kind of fairy are you? All kinds of ghosts and monsters come out for me. I shouted, holding the sword in my hand. At this moment, my hair stood up, and I felt like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Suddenly, I felt a touch on my back, and I quickly jumped up and stepped back. There was nothing, but what I truly felt was that there was a hand behind me. I stepped back and didn't dare to get closer. The wall I was standing on just now, the more I stepped back, the more I felt like I hit something. With a bang, I felt like I had bumped into something's arms, and the next moment I lifted my head. I saw countless long hair, like a black waterfall of death, enveloping my cheeks. I felt the coldness of this hair and lifted my head. A 3-meter-tall monster with a ferocious mouth appeared in front of me. I let out a scream and stepped back directly. At that time, I was sitting on the ground, I didn't know. Although I had already greeted the ghosts and monsters so many times, now I would appear so embarrassed. That ghost showed terror, his nails were 30 centimeters long, and his whole body was torn and tattered, and his internal organs were exposed. I was thinking this was not a ghost at all. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through my mind, and the thing in front of me was a zombie. Unlike ghosts, zombies have lost their souls after death, but their bodies still retain consciousness. They are more difficult to eliminate than ghosts and monsters, and easier to eliminate than ghosts and monsters. Because this zombie only exists physically, as long as its body is destroyed, but the zombie's body is not painful and is indestructible. But he is different from ghosts. All physical means cannot have an effect on ghosts, but physical means have an effect on zombies. I feel the meaning of this zombie. He is attacking me, and my mind keeps touching thoughts. But when faced with this attacking zombie, I know that this blow is to avoid love. I quickly dodged the zombie, and as a result, the brick on my stone bed on top of the 10 bed split almost 4 times. I couldn't help but marvel at the power of this zombie, but I didn't have time to marvel. The zombie was attacking me again, and I was afraid of being scratched by it, because being scratched by a zombie would infect me with zombie poison, and I might even become a zombie myself. I ran quickly towards the outside of the house. But I forgot about the ghost night tour tonight. I came to my backyard and looked at the monsters all over the street. At that time, I was in a dilemma. If I ran to the street and were caught by the monsters, I would also die. If I didn't run to the street, I would still die. Looking at the zombies in front of me, they were not ordinary zombies at all. This is a jumping zombie among zombies. I understand that I am currently in a dilemma where I have to die or not. I am nervous in my heart, and with my foundation building cultivation, I cannot kill that jumping stiff person. My heart was extremely nervous. Grandpa was not here, Kieran was not there, and I was almost done. I slowly retreated, feeling his bouncing and jumping as he approached my huge body. My naked hair stood straight on end. Chapter 10. 100 Ghosts Come Out Together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That zombie jumped at me, my heart was pounding, I could live an extra second is a second. I ran towards that small alley, although it was filled with all the ghosts, I still had to live. I ran out with all my might and finally crossed the street. The zombie jumped out, but when he jumped to the door, he nervously retreated. I breathed a sigh of relief. The zombie dared not come out, but now I am also among all these ghosts. I held my breath and dared not breathe. I am particularly afraid that this ghost will discover me. Kill me, I don't want my youth that has not yet begun to scatter here. With my current cultivation level, I can hold my breath for at most 10 minutes, but I still haven't thought of where to go. And I'm also wondering why this zombie appeared in my home. Although there are ghosts outside, unless this zombie appeared in my house early on, I have been living at home for decades and I don't even know about zombies. I looked at the zombie in my backyard, he looked at me, and I also looked at him. I don't know why this zombie is, he looked at me with an indescribable feeling. I carefully stared at the zombie, which looked very familiar with one of my people. Silly! I exclaimed in surprise, as if the zombie knew my thoughts. Surprised, he walked towards me, and it was my words that caused countless ghosts around him to stop. They looked at me, and I knew I had already revealed my voice. I know I'm finished, I don't know if Shah still retains that memory, and I don't know if these ghosts really won't attack me as rumored. I stayed quietly in place. But these ghosts looked at me with confusion on their faces, and they gathered around to watch. And the two fools who had turned into zombies also jumped towards me, and they all stayed in front of me. I watched this scene, and my cold sweat flowed all the way to my palms. Now it looks like I'm taking a shower with sweat. The screams made by these ghosts and monsters, they were roaring there, and the zombie two fools were also roaring beside me. I thought they were going to eat me, but in fact, they were communicating in their own language, and I couldn't understand. I looked at them, and they also looked at me, as if recalling memories from before. Those who lived in this town were all my acquaintances. They all knew me to some extent during their lifetime. They looked at me without saying anything, but continued to walk through the streets at night. I finally breathed a sigh of relief, but the two silly people in front of me, who were over 3 meters tall, were still staring at me. I didn't dare to move because his face was already ulcerated and looked very scary. I held the demon-slaying sword tightly, never expecting that a Taoist like me would be so embarrassed. Roar! Shah suddenly let out many roars from his mouth. I thought he was going to eat me. I closed my eyes and raised my hand, but Shah just tilted his head to one side and looked at me. I felt that Shah probably wasn't going to eat me. Silly looked at me as if he remembered playing with him before. Then he looked at his own body and walked away. As Silly walked away, I looked at his increasingly destitute figure. I know he probably played with me before reminiscing. Somehow, there used to be people in this town, but now it seems like I'm the only one left. I know, although my grandfather told me that this town is full of ghosts, I am certain that these two fools are definitely not ghosts. He is the person I have played with before, and the more I think about it, the more terrifying I become. I wonder if the person I played with before was actually a human or a ghost. Or maybe I don't exist at all. I'm a ghost. I came to this town, and it's normal. My mind suddenly collapsed, and I was wondering if I'm alive or dead now. I shivered fiercely, but when I wanted to continue thinking, I opened my eyes and woke up. I looked at the Qilin next to me, touched its head, and then looked at the sun shining brightly in the sky that day. Then I looked at my grandfather's notes next to me. I was lost in thought, and a lot of cold sweat oozed from my back, making me feel cold. Qilin looked at me with a crooked neck, it didn't know what I had experienced. I am thinking. I seemed to feel my grandfather's presence just now, but when I opened my eyes, he disappeared. So, is Grandpa really here, is he not here, or was he just dreaming? Did I sleep all day? I kept asking myself, and I felt like there was something wrong with my mental state. But when I was 6 years old, I did indeed see ghosts. I also touched the sword in my hand. I slept with it last night, and it is now in my hand. I slept while reading my grandfather's notes last night, and the notes are here. So what exactly happened to me yesterday and today? I felt strange, but I just thought I was possessed and never thought about what was going on. Am I under the spell of a ghost? I am still in the illusion created by ghosts. I took a fierce bite of myself and realized it was okay. All of this made me feel unbelievable. Kieran was also humming beside me. Did I fall asleep last night while reading my notes? But when I was reading my notes last night, I remember standing and not lying in bed, but I also remember that I was holding a sword and reading my notes in bed yesterday. I don't know what happened. I want to inquire with my grandfather clearly, but he has long been gone. However, in my consciousness, my grandfather has always existed, and I feel that my thinking is very confused. I don't know what all of this is about. Until I thought for a long time, the moon gradually rose again. I haven't eaten all day today, and Kieran is also hungry like me. I've been thinking about what happened last night, but strangely enough, tonight is also the night of the full moon. My heart only shivered, and I looked at the Kieran again. This time it didn't disappear, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this time it's not a dream, it's illusory. But I became nervous again. It's not a dream, it's not illusory. Will that ghost come again, and will that zombie come again? I kept shivering until I looked at the Kieran again and it was gone. Finally, I clenched my fist and sword again, raising my guard to its peak. I looked at everything and shouted loudly for the unicorn, Grandpa, and anything, but there was no response. But the only real feeling for me was that the cold tentacles behind me, as well as the cold nails that cut through my skin. I'm sweating profusely, I've been scratched by a zombie. Countless thoughts flashed through my mind. I had already been scratched by a zombie. I felt like I was going to die, I was going to die, I was going to die. I was very nervous, and my body was constantly trembling. I felt everything, feeling the air around me. I lifted my head, just like I did at the time, whether it was something I had experienced or something I had anticipated. The result was a terrifying face. I imagined it again in front of me, but it turned out to be a female face, and I had never seen such a terrifying face before. I imagined it again in front of me, but it turned out to be a female face, and I had never seen it before. So what is going on? My heart became nervous, and I was so scared that I quickly stepped back. I felt like today was the most terrifying day I had ever encountered. The female ghost kept approaching me, and my pain reminded me that it was not a dream. I stepped back, kept moving back, but the female ghost was walking slowly. No matter how hard I stepped back, the female ghost kept a distance from me, but she moved so slowly. So what was going on? I shouted for help, but no one knew where I was, and no one would come to touch me. Even Kieran, I didn't know his whereabouts, and I didn't feel the contract between us. The female ghost approached me, her face delicate, but when he approached me, his ferocious face appeared, and she bit at me. The gust of wind I felt was coming, the speed of the blow I felt, and I knew I would definitely get my head bitten off.